Good evening. Welcome to the Barbican Theatre and this evening's masterclass as part of our ReBels masterclasses. I don't know if you've attended any of ours before, so I'm going to do some general housekeeping. We're in the Zoom webinar view, which means that we can't see your faces, so we're just going to presume you're there and having a good time. But the chat function and the Q&A function are open and live for you. So please do feel free to comment on anything you hear this evening and to feed in any questions you would like. This is part of our ongoing series of masterclasses, which are Thursday nights at 6 p.m. We have some brilliant ones coming up. We've got a big one about making giant puppets for puppet parades happening next week, and a really exciting one about Chicago footwork from one of the best Chicago footworkers, who happens to be based in Plymouth, so I really wouldn't miss that. And they will be returning again on April the 22nd. Tonight, however, I'm really, really pleased to be able to introduce Ceri Wade. Ceri Wade is probably, I think, one of the most interesting and best women in the production management and event management in the UK. I have worked with her on a number of occasions, and it's not only always a joy, but holy Moses, is she at the top of her game. So I'm so pleased that she was up to being here this evening and being a guest on our masterclasses. I'm going to hand you over to Ceri, and she's going to present about herself and her work and what she's done, and then we're going to open the floor for a Q&A, but you are in for a treat. Ceri, over for you.
Hello.
We've got you.
You've got me. Fantastic. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Ceri Wade, and thank you so much, Laura, for that lovely introduction. Very much appreciated. Yeah, my name is Ceri. I am a freelance event producer. I have done quite a lot of different work in various different areas of UK event production and abroad as well. And what I wanted to do was to speak to you a bit about my experience and also to talk to you about how it is to work in a team and the importance of the other people around you when you're producing events. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm open to all and any questions at any point, so yeah, please don't be shy. So I have been working in events probably since I was about 14, 15. I grew up going to folk music festivals with my parents. My mum is a musician and my dad is a Morris dancer, which is not something I freely admitted to a lot of people when I was younger, but now I couldn't be more proud of him. And so I grew up going to lots of festivals around the UK, sort of as part of my heritage, I guess. So I kind of consider myself incredibly lucky that that was the case. And learned very quickly what it was like to experience the growing of a community in a greenfield environment, and just what it meant to bring in all of that infrastructure and also to bring all those people together to create beautiful art and connections, which I guess is what art is mostly about, really, and it's definitely my experience of music festivals and art. It was all about that sharing and joining people together. So that sort of made me very passionate and want to potentially continue to do that as part of my career. So I went to university and I studied event management. And whilst I was there, I sort of tried to do as much work experience as I could, using my my degree as a way in, I guess. So I did stewarding. I actually first started off stewarding at workshops when I was 14, sort of moving chairs around and helping serve the tea. And then I progressed to doing artist liaison backstage for sort of some of the main stages at some smaller festivals, and yeah, generally kind of trying to make myself as useful as possible. This was all unpaid whilst I was still training. I think I got my first job actually being paid when I was about 19, and I got paid £30 a day, I think, then. So yeah, it was definitely about sort of pouring in some passion and trying to kind of make sure that people knew who I was. When I left university, I started working at a music agency. So I worked as an artist and well, an agent's assistant to begin with, so putting lots of tour packs together for artists that were touring around, mostly around the UK and into Europe as well sometimes. And then I worked, I was lucky enough to sort of start going on tour with some of those bands. So my first actual tour was in 2012, where I did a tour. I was very lucky, actually. My first ever tour was to Australia and New Zealand, so with a band called Lao, which was amazing, really, really amazing. And so yeah, I kind of got a bit of a taste for the touring part there, and also about sort of understanding what it took in order to be able to look at producing different events and then moving around both internationally and nationally. I then got much more into sort of production side of things. I worked at a lot of UK festivals. I would sort of load my car up in May and drive around with my tiny little tent in the back, and I'd sort of arrive back on dry land in September, having pretty much spent my entire summer living out of the back of my car. And I did that in my sort of late teens and early 20s, and absolutely loved it. Just met lots and lots of people, and yeah, just worked as hard as I could, and had as much fun as I could. So that was all amazing. And then in 2006, I was at a festival called Beautiful Days, which is down near your guys' neck of the woods, I guess, Devon. And I was backstage, and I met one of the guys from Arcadia, which is the company that I've worked for 10 years. And if you don't know it, I will show you a short film in a minute. So, but it's we were the collective that built the giant mechanical spider at Glastonbury, and but yeah, I will show you a bit more about that in a bit. But I met one of the guys backstage there before he was had Arcadia, and we just gelled. And a couple of years later, he asked me to production manage his new field at Glastonbury. I didn't really know what production management meant then, and I will go into that a bit in a minute. And forgive the pun, but it was definitely a bit of a baptism of fire. I didn't really know what I was doing, and nor did they. But everyone was still alive at the end of the weekend, and so were we. And it was a very steep learning curve from that point in. And then I worked with them for 10 years, produced all their international tours, and produced the field at Glastonbury for 11 years now. And then last year I went freelance, so I am now working on various different individual projects, including with the Barbican Theatre in Plymouth, and consulting for some other people for events. Obviously things are quite complicated, or have the potential to be coming out of COVID, but I think as a general events people that work there, we've got such a burning desire to bring it back, and we will do one way or another, but that's slightly digressing. So production manager, as I said, there's many different definitions of a production manager and what they do. There is no right or wrong, but different events and teams will definitely define them in different ways. So I guess I can only really talk to you about what my experience is of it, but please do be aware that this isn't all encompassing. It's all encompassing for my experience of the role, but there will be, you know, different people who experience it differently, and different expectations on the role as well. You know, a good example for me is that I'm not a technician. You know, I can plug in a socket and a wire, but I am definitely not an audio tech, and I'm not an LD, and I'm not a laser operator. I've been really lucky to have worked with some incredibly skilled technicians in my time, and I would not even start to pretend that that is within my skill set. But I've been very lucky to work with the people that really do know what they're doing when it comes to that. So I think that just to give you a bit of an overview, really, my understanding and my definition of a production manager is the person that gets the right people in the right place at the right time with the right equipment under the right budget. And again, that can sometimes be called a producer, or you know, or various different roles, but that's the sort of understanding of the role that I'm going to talk to you a bit about today. And I guess another way of looking at it potentially is that it's a bit like you have an orchestra conductor, so they don't play the instruments themselves, but the skill lies in getting that group of people to play together harmoniously. Which I think has definitely been part of my skill set, and again why I really wanted to kind of emphasize the importance of the team when it comes to what my experience of my role has been. So yeah, so in terms of the actual job role, I will talk quite a bit about Arcadia within this presentation. It was, you know, it was my full-time job for 10 years. It's something I'm immensely proud of, and also I think is a really great example about how to marry the teams together. So in terms of Arcadia, it was production manager was managing Arcadia as a touring crew. So that was of over 50 people, 50 crew members around the world. It was also the management of the Arcadia Arena at Glastonbury specifically, which holds 50,000 capacity people. So, and that was 500 crew that I was in charge of there. So 500 crew, 50,000 people. That's quite a lot of people to be responsible for. And so what that involves is an awful lot of logistics, operations, health and safety. And also the management of those crew, the subcontractors. So by subcontractors, I mean the audio, people that are supplying the audio, or the caterers, for example, or the people that are supplying the scaffolding or the infrastructure that you need to put in your greenfield site. And then those associated companies as well. It's quite an all-encompassing role. You've got to be really across all of your stuff, including things for sites, hospitalities, booking, all of the money. And I've got a little note there that says mum. You know, I quite often felt a bit like I was mum to over 50 people when we were on tour. And touring comes with its own challenges as well. And again, I will talk about that a little bit later. And quite often I was really lucky enough to be involved in some of the creative development for the new shows as well. So it was quite a far-reaching role from my experience of it. And yeah, it was a real joy and a real privilege to be part of it. I just thought it was probably worth bringing in a photo at this point for any of you that may not have seen it. I never like to assume. So this is probably the most well-known of the structures from Arcadia, which is the Spider. So it's a 50-ton mechanical metal structure, which is built out of customs and excise scanning cranes, helicopter tails, Rolls-Royce jet engines, they're the eyes. And then you can also see there the flames coming out of the top of it. You can see the lights, you can see the people. If you look sort of off the end of one of the arms, those two figures are two female aerialists that are swinging around in a G-force spin. They're going very, very fast up near some very, very hot flames with pyrotechnics going over the top. And the reason I wanted to show you that was just to hopefully start to sow the seed of what actually needs to work in harmony to make that picture that you see in front of you something which is actually okay to do. It's dangerous, but in Arcadia we always prided ourselves in doing dangerous things safely, and creating the illusion of something which should be impossible, but it's not. And the reason it's not impossible is because of the people and the teams that you work with to make it not possible. I hope that makes sense. I thought this might be quite a nice thing just to show you on a smaller scale. So it's called the Afterburner. It's one of the smaller structures that Arcadia toured with. This is actually in Burning Man in the desert in the US, and that toured with a team of 10 people. So it doesn't all have to be massive, all the bells and whistles, all of those things. In fact, as I said earlier, people's experience of tour management, tour management or production management, it can be, when I've toured with a band, it was the 3 band members, the sound engineer, and me as the production manager. So, the sliding scales of these things, and I just wanted to kind of throw that in, just to kind of let you know that. I am now going to show you a video which is from the world tour, the Spider Spirit World Tour from 2016, just to give you a bit more of a sense of, hopefully this will show you a bit more about the scale of what it was that we were doing. I'll come back and chat about it a bit more after that. So I hope you enjoy the film.
The fires of today are the beacons calling our ancestors to come. Nations coming together to celebrate in the oneness of life. Since the start of time, we have never changed in our song.
Landing complete. Initialize metamorphosis. Metamorphosis complete.
My name is Jordan. I am 12 years old, and I am a Wajak Nyunga. My ancestors have sung this song for centuries, and it has kept them strong as one. The people of Perth, this is our story. As we gather here, and may our ancestors' energy be with all of us tonight. Call out the spider spirit. May it make us one.
So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it gives you a little bit more of a sort of a taste of what it was that we were actually producing when we went around the world. So that was the landing show that we took, and that was the one that we toured the most between 2014 and 2018 was when we had that out on the road. And in terms of what that takes for the people that are putting it on, so again, that was, you know, approximately 50 people that were out on the road. So 50 flights, 50 visas, 50 people's worth of wages, you know, 50 people's worth of hotel rooms, safety documentation, all of that. So yeah, so I just sort of wanted to kind of get a bit under the bonnet, really, of having a look at that video and then trying to understand what it takes from the people that need to be able to work together to put that on. So, working in a team, and obviously this can be applied to many different areas as well. But again, I'll talk about my own experience of it and what it took for us. So. Communication, obviously that's one of the most important things for a group of people that are working together. Working in between the disciplines, I'm going to go through the different teams and what they actually did, well, and also for a general in terms of event production. Systems. Anyone who's worked with me will know that I am a bit of a systems queen. I probably bother most of my colleagues with my sort of attention to the systems that I create, but it works for me. So yeah, create them, use them, utilize them. A support and non-blame ethos, and the importance of mental health and well-being on an event or when you're on tour. People are people, and you know, we all under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure to produce a show. And you know, that old adage of when you work in entertainment about the show must go on, but that shouldn't be at the cost of the people that are putting the event on, and that's down to the team and looking after each other and making sure that you take care of your mental health and your well-being on an event. It's long hours, you know. I've worked 18-hour days before, and I'm not the only person by any stretch of the imagination that will have done that, you know, on working on events. And so in terms of, you know, making sure that you look after yourself and your teammates, I can't stress that enough in terms of how important it is. Scheduling as well. I suspect that some of my colleagues, have you seen your schedule? People that, you know, that's probably one of the things I'm most likely to say to my team, or have been most likely to say to my team in the past. Respect, respecting yourself and respecting the people around you, and respect that, you know, everybody has their part to play and that they're all hugely skilled at what they do, but it takes all of you coming together to make, you know, it's the sum of its parts, really. You're all together playing as one orchestra, and nobody is more important than anybody else. Everybody really deserves your respect and deserves your understanding in terms of what they're putting in, because what you're all putting in together, you're all looking to get out. Advancing, making sure that, you know, you as a team are sharing your information, and that you're putting the time and the effort and the energy into advancing the show before you get there. Make sure you have fun. Don't lose sight of the fact that you're there to, you know, you're probably there because there's groups of people that you've recognized and that you like, and if you're lucky, people that you love. I was lucky, and it was people that I love, and I think sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that, and you kind of got to remind yourself sometimes to have a bit of fun. And it's a serious thing that you're doing, but don't take yourself too seriously, and try and make sure that you understand that we can all make mistakes and laugh at yourself a bit here and there. It is hard work and long hours. Working in production, event production is definitely not for the faint-hearted, and it does take it out of you, which is why the importance of the mental health and well-being, and in which case you do really have to have passion and dedication for what you're doing. You just can't do it otherwise. And another thing that's really important is skill sharing, and having understudies, because nobody is invincible. And if someone goes down, you need to be able to replace them, or at least have somebody step in. I've been that person myself when I've been on tour. I got tonsillitis when we were in Taiwan one year, and my colleague and my co-worker, she had to stay. I mean, I couldn't actually speak. It was, again, sort of laughing at yourself. My colleague came and sort of sat in my bed with me, and I was typing things to speak to her because I literally couldn't speak. And we'd been touring together for a good few years by then, and she stepped in, and she was me, and I was completely confident in her that she could do that. And I hope that I was, able to share enough of what it was that I did that enabled her to do that. And that involves also not being selfish with the information that you hold. No one can produce an event on their own. The best run events are down to great planning, great communication, and if you're lucky, which I have been, a really great team of people. And it can be one of the most rewarding things to achieve as a group, but it can also be one of the most difficult things to pull off. And the safety of the team and also the audience as well is more important than anything else. Everything else comes second. The safety is the most important, and all of the communication and the working between the disciplines is about you trying to create that environment which is safe and where people can have an amazing time. There is an element of risk in producing any event, so no matter how big or small, but it really is how you mitigate that risk that is the key thing. And as I said, communication is absolutely the number one tool of the trade for any production or event manager. And the way that you communicate is incredibly important. When you're in charge of a large team of people or a small team of people, any team of people, there has to be a level of honesty and trust there. And as I just said, of information sharing. Some people don't want to share their information, as I think they believe it's their power, but the power doesn't come from holding it to yourself. The power comes from the sharing. As I said, you can't do it all alone, and also you as an event producer or production manager, as I said earlier, you cannot possibly hold all the skills. You just can't, and you shouldn't expect yourself to either. It's too much for anybody. The way I see it is like I said about the orchestra, but it's also like a conjurer. Your job is to bind the disciplines together to create that space where magic can happen, and it does. And it's a real privilege to be a part of it when that happens. In terms of communication, own your mistakes, tell someone, own up, say that was my fault, I did that wrong. You're learning. We're always learning at any point in our lives. And if you can be humble and appreciate that there's always more to learn, then you're much more likely to be a good team member, a good co-worker. But it's also up to you as a manager, as a leader, to create an environment that enables this, a non-blame culture, supportive, and because working on an event or touring, it can feel really, really lonely. People are stretching themselves to the limits. When you're touring, you're away from your family, your partner, your kids, and I remember when I first started touring, I used to not really hear from my family, and they just used to think I was off having a jolly old time around the world, and I was, but I was also quite lonely sometimes, and I sort of said to them, no, I need you to check in on me. And they did once I'd said that. And I really appreciated it. So it's always worth thinking about, how other people might feel and that we can all feel lonely, even when we're in a really big group. And as a manager, again, it's your responsibility to understand people's skills and boundaries, and also to make sure that you get feedback from the quieter people in the team. Their voices are as valuable, they're just not as loud. And again, that sort of comes back to creating an environment where people are able to speak and to come forwards, and yeah, showing people that you value them, thanking them, you know. And it can be a bit of a thankless task, being the manager, being the production manager. You know, it really is your job to show people that you value them, and you won't always get that back yourself, but that's okay. You know, it is okay. I remember we were away one year for Mother's Day, and the team all bought me Mother's Day cards and presents, and I cried. It was so lovely. You know, and you know, it goes back to me saying about feeling like mum, and they felt the same thing about me too, which was obviously really, really lovely. But yeah, you'll get your rewards when you can, and even if you don't, it's fine. Systems. So this goes back to, you know, my definition. Production, making sure the right people in the right place at the right time with the right equipment for the right budget. That takes a lot of work, and systems are the only way that you will do that. You know, I always say that people will stand a lot more chance of doing things correctly if you tell them what you expect of them. Might sound really obvious, but it's you know, it's all about being able to communicate the information to people, and that's what systems do. So and they really are, you know, a carpenter, their tools are their saws and their, you know, their hand tools, but your systems as a production manager or an event producer, you know, the systems are your tools. So the systems that I've used are scheduling systems. So important, you know, so important. Communication systems, you know, when we're away on tour, how is all of the different 50 people that I'm touring with, how are they all going to know what their call times are? What if they change, you know? So we set up the WhatsApp groups, and then we had to set up another WhatsApp group because, you know, so we set up the work WhatsApp group and then the social WhatsApp group so people know which pub to go to after work and things like that. You know, but when you're touring and you're in a foreign country, you really do hold the keys. People's lives are in your hands in terms of them being safe, and communication is so important for that. And you know, and again, to take it out of a non-touring context, you know, if you're on an event site, or if you're, you know, doing shows in a theatre, or if you're touring around some of the more rural touring venues, all of these things, you still need your systems and ways to communicate with people. Safety protocols, procedures, systems, you know, I can't send someone up a giant metal spider whilst the flames are going off on top if they don't know what the safety procedures are, and if they haven't got a harness on, if they're not wearing safety equipment. And so it is my job as an event manager to make sure that the people who I'm working with are fully aware of the systems that are in place and what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. Are people trained for the job that you're expecting them to do? You know, are there financial systems? Are there POs in place? Are there ways of getting paid? How do people invoice? All of these things, you know, if you can give all of this information to people in a way that they can digest it. My tool for that has always been sending out a tour book, a crew book. So it will have from the address of the hotel, the address of the site, to how do you say hello in Thai? How do you say thank you in Thai? Things like that. What are the local culture things? What are the things that are, you know, considered rude over there? All those sorts of things. You know, people, how do people communicate with each other? Where are certain people going to be at certain times? And that can often, you know, you can often get a lot of information, and in terms of people doing what you're expecting them to by getting your contracts and your agreements in place in really good time. So I'm just going to run through a bit of the different department teams in that you can expect to work with in any production. Actually, you might have some of them, not all of them, but in most events, you will have a mixture of the departments that I'm going to go through. So it's going to be about me talking through a bit about my experience about it again, and each event will be produced slightly differently, but there will be really common threads, so I'll run it through. So event, then you have your heads of department, your production team, your build or your site teams, your technical, and your SFX. And then you would have your artist and your show team. Yeah, I'll run through them individually. So the event, so this is the producer of the event. This can be the artist, it can be the producer. So for example, Glastonbury Festival, it can be your local authority, it could be it could be a private person that wants to put on an event. But yeah, that tends to be the person who has come up with the idea of putting the event on, and they will either hire someone or they will themselves have to kind of produce the event management plan, or an EMP, how we refer to it. They will also be responsible for getting the individual suppliers to give in their safety paperwork. They will need to come up with an overall site plan, which will include sort of rendezvous points and emergency services information. They will be responsible for putting in place SAG meetings, which are the multi-agency meetings that will need to happen before any event can happen. So that would include your police, your fire, your ambulance, your environmental health. And they would also deal with the licensing. They will usually ultimately be responsible for the budget and hold the keys to that budget in terms of the overall production of the event. And then you have your heads of department. So then if you come down to the team producing the show, and again, you could think of this in various ways. So this could be, say, Rihanna has a touring team, that she could have this touring team, and that's what we could be talking about. Or it could be going back to that, that small band that I toured with, and the heads of department might not be all on the road. It could be a theatre, and so the heads of department would be the senior management team for that theatre. So yeah, you can sort of take this and apply it to whatever scenario that you most easily understand moving forwards, or even now. So the senior management team is the key link of the information sharing between all of the teams. They would be responsible, in my experience, for inputting into the scheduling. So if somebody needed access to some rehearsal space during the day, then from the show team, for example, that they would then speak to the production manager and the build team to make sure that was all okay and it was cleared and it was safe. They're also responsible as a representative at the head of department for the pre-show meetings, and then also, in my experience, daily meetings on site. Really important to keep yourself up to date with any developments, any holdbacks, or are we ahead of schedule or behind schedule. They also work on the show development together, because it needs input from all of those different people in order to be able to do it. The heads of department would also be responsible for understanding the safety procedures and inputting to those and creating them, and of any of the crew training. They then also communicate back to their individual teams, and they are responsible, like I said, for health and safety, and also for the team well-being, and that could be, has John rested enough today? Oh no, he hasn't. Okay, well, we're going to put him on a later call time. Those sorts of things. It's almost like a representative of so let's go with the performance team. If one of the performers has hurt their knee and they need to rest it for a bit, they would communicate that to their head of department, who would then communicate it back to the senior management team in their meetings and say, right, we need to rest that person today. So it's kind of a link, really, for the information sharing between the teams. I just put in one of my favourite ever senior management team meetings. That was in the sunshine at Miami, surrounded by palm trees. So yeah, they can be quite fun. Production. So production is overall delivery of the show, going back to the right place, right time, etc. In my experience, production is usually the point of contact for the promoter, responsible for scheduling all the infrastructure, the subcontractors, the crew calls, the plant, making sure everyone's got the right flights, that they've got the right injections, all of that. So crewing, contracting all the crews, making sure that they've got their public liability insurance, they've got their travel insurance, that about any pre-existing medical issues. And you would work, so the tour manager would be part of the production team, and they deal with the travel, hospitality, logistics, and as an overall, it's responsible for the crew welfare, the team welfare, which goes back to the mum thing. Also responsible for implementing safety protocols and procedures and health and safety. Just thought I'd show you a bit of a production village that we had in Australia. Build and site. So build is usually, so again, if you looked at a sort of a more traditional touring context, so the build, they would come in and build the stage that Rihanna might set up her, 14 articulated truck worth of lorries worth of equipment. Also site infrastructure and procurement, including any site services, electrics, water, workshop management, plant, site management, and health and safety. And you can see that health and safety is a constant thread, because it's like I said, it is the most important thing. Health, your well-being, are you okay? Safety, are you safe? The responsibility ultimately of a good production manager, of any production manager, is to make sure that their team are healthy and safe. I just thought I'd throw in a little example of a site plan there. We won't dwell on it too much, but it just goes to show a little bit about the planning. Those three little black things that you can see are cranes, which are put in place for, sorry, not cranes, cherry pickers, which are put in place for rescue plans. So you've always got to be thinking, how am I going to make my team safe? What planning can I do? How can I mitigate any risk? And then I just put in a couple of quick pictures here of the spider build. We would have the status put down so everybody knew at what stage we were in terms of the build. That's a 120-ton crane that came to do a tripod lift. Communication, that's 2 people having a chat in all of their PPE. That's 4 people having a chat, with one of them hanging off the side of the spider in a harness. You can see all of the safety equipment that they're wearing and that they're doing whilst they're dealing with what they're dealing with up there. And then there's another crane shot, which I thought was quite good. I think that was in South Korea. Tech and SFX. So this involves audio, lighting and video mapping, lasers, flame systems, haze and CO2, pyrotechnics, comms, hugely important, and costume tech. And so usually within my experience, because I'm not technical, I've worked with some, as I said, some really talented technicians, but also we would have an overall technical manager who would draw all of these disciplines together, and then with the production manager, sitting over the top of that. And it's dangerous stuff, but if it's done well and it's done safely, it can look amazing and really adds to the delivery of a show, in any context, from the smallest to the largest. I just happen to be using quite a large example here. And where those people sit, we used to call it mission control, with all sorts of equipment, desks, computers. There's 20 people in the spider one for our mission control. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of show you a few pictures and give you a bit of an idea of the sort of belly of the beast, and underneath the skirting boards kind of thing. And yeah, I thought this was quite a nice shot, because it shows you there's a chap sitting in that seat driving that arm, with 2 performers sitting in harness, and a flame going off behind them. There's a lot going on there, and there's a lot of communication that's had to happen in order for that to be a safe environment to be in. It doesn't look safe, I appreciate that, but there was an awful lot of work that's gone into it to make it so. Same with this one. You'll see the lasers. You'll see the girl there in her queen jellyfish alien costume, plus what we call a mini spider, which was about the size of a car, which is being driven by somebody on a zip wire going over the heads of people. All of these things take a serious amount of planning, and a serious amount of paperwork. It's not all glamorous, definitely not. I would have to collect over 120 pieces of paper on a daily basis for it to be signed off to say that it was safe to go ahead for use for performance. So yeah, it's attention to detail, and it is it's full on, but it's worth it. Thought it might be quite nice just to show a bit of a picture of during the day rehearsals, and then that's the sum of its parts all coming together when it's in the show. The show is, like like I say, it's the culmination of all of the departments coming together and working together as one. It's like 50 people driving one machine. And the same can be said again, you know, not just to have the Spider or Arcadia at all as the only example, but, you know, of large scale touring shows, small scale touring shows, theatres, bands, you know, all of those things. A band can only go on stage if all of that planning and those departments have done what they need to do. You know, has the licensing been put through? What time do they need to come off stage? Is their hospitality rider there? Has the audio been checked? You know, these are all things that as you work through when you become a production manager, they do become second nature in terms of the questions that you ask, but your schedule and your workflow and your planning will all need to be there to back all of these things up, you know, to make sure that you literally have ticked every box, crossed every T, dotted every I. It's so much attention to detail. It can feel overwhelming, but it's not. And actually, when you get it right and you do it and you've put all of that hard work in, it's like you're fitting all of the pieces of a really brilliant puzzle together. And when it comes together, it's just like, wow, we did that. So yeah, might sound a bit overwhelming, but you know, the overwhelming bit for me comes when you really, you know that you've achieved it and it actually works. So the show is like I said, it's about when the stage is live. It's about the artists and the performers. So to go to our band analogy, it's when the band comes on stage, or you know, for us it was the show team, which was a team of about 20 people, including the performers. The DJs can be part of that. You know, and to get to that point, you have to have your rehearsals, you know, you have to have your costumes, your costumier, you know, the people that make the costumes. You also have a show caller. And in my experience, there's usually a specific show manager or stage manager. And Arcadia had a DJ manager as well. So different people managing all the different parts of it. And for us, you know, the DJs were always quite a rogue element. You know, some of them would turn up having drank too much, and we couldn't allow intoxicated people onto the structure. So you know, they were definitely part of a rogue element, but again, we had to manage that by sending out you know, information to them beforehand and telling them what we expected of them, and that made it loads better. Just put a few pictures here of some of the show team. I put this one in because again, it goes back to communication. So what you'll see in this picture is you can see a lot of them are wearing earpieces and what we call cans, which are large, you know, headphones that sit on your head. But they're also all talking to each other. And the information we you know, the information that goes out over the airwaves, you know, it's really important. And having a system for 50 people to be able to talk to each other when you can't hear what each other's saying, when you're stood almost in front of each other because the music's so loud, you know, it's imperative. You know, if there's any rescues that need to be done, or if there's someone's in trouble, or if there's been a change in the scheduling, or, you know, if there's a problem. My role when the show was on was as event control. So if there was a problem in the crowd, or if I was communicated to from the producers' event control, so they might say, for example, at Glastonbury, you're too full, we're going to have to stop people coming to you, you've got your 50,000 people. Or they might radio me after the main stages went down and say, you've got 30,000 people headed in your direction, brace yourself. And I'd go, thanks. But you know, so I would then communicate that with the rest of my team to be like, right, okay, we need certain people in certain places, we need to, you know, spread out the security, make sure that the stewards on the gates, make sure that we, you know, we help to mitigate that people flow. And we would have all of our plans would be in place about this, you know, that there weren't, we would try and plan for as many of these things as possible so that we would have individual scenario planning for any given event that might happen. And that really is part of the skill of managing an event. Yeah, it's just quite a nice picture of it in full flight again, and hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of what I mean about all of those people and things having to work together. You know, if I go back to that orchestra analogy. So what makes a successful tour production? So I've touched on a lot of this, but I just thought it was worth running through. So advancing contracts. Does everybody know what is expected of them? Have we done all of our advance work? Have we got the information out to the people that need it? You know, your logistics, your operations, are you moving your equipment around at the right time? Have you tested all of your lights before they go in a ship, you know, in a shipping container that you'll see them on the other side of the world? You know, have we got all of the pieces, electrical pieces that we need, that we know that we might not be able to buy elsewhere? Have all of the costumes been cleaned? You know, all of those sorts of things. The local promoters are really key. You know, they have to want you there to start off with. And again, the same is true if you're doing a national tour. Have you been in touch with them? Do you know what you're expecting? Do you know what your loading bay looks like? Can your truck get to the back of the theatre? You know, have you got your local crew booked? If you have got your local crew booked, do they speak English? You know, or do you have a Spanish speaker in your crew that can communicate with them? Have you booked your freight? Does your shipping arrive on time? You can't turn up, you know, to a show abroad and your shipping to be 2 days late. You just can't. You can have it 2 weeks early, but you can't have it 2 days late. Has all your tech been tested? I've said that, but you know, do you know what safety procedures there are in that particular theatre? Who's your safety officer? You know, do they have any specific things? Do they let you do fire in that area? I mean, we went to Australia and they didn't want to let us use our flame equipment, so we had to go in for a meeting with the council when we got there and persuade them that we knew what we were doing. You can understand why they might look at something like that and go, what on earth is this, you know? So yeah, it's your success comes in your planning and in your communication and in your attention to detail. It's planning the event to within an inch of its life, and having what we call tabletop meetings, which is running scenarios. You know, what would happen if? And I mean, the thing is you can't plan for every given scenario. I mean, you'd be running scenarios forever in a day, but you can put structures in to be able to understand how you and your team might respond in a crisis. What's your incident command structure? Who is ultimately in charge? You know, who is in charge of disseminating the information to the rest of the team? Do you have somebody who's communicating? Do you have somebody who's eyes and ears on the ground? You know, are you able to assign them those roles in the event of an emergency? Like I say, you can't plan for every scenario, but you can put a structure in for you and your team to understand how you might respond in a crisis. And I think that's the skill of a good event manager, is to make sure that you have those systems. There I go again with my systems, but you know, it's systems and procedures. You know, how will you do this? Imagine the worst thing that could possibly happen and make a plan for how you can deal with it and hope that it doesn't. Plan for the worst and hope for the best. You know, that's my mantra. I mean, it really is. So a typical day on tour and key challenges of the role for a production manager. I just thought it was useful to just, again, talk a bit about my own experience of it, and to tell people what to expect if it is something that you're interested in getting into. But also, I think it's really helpful to understand it, you know, from a point of view of if you're a technician or if you're a performer, what is it that your production manager is having to do? Why do they look too busy to talk to you sometimes? Are they scary people? You know, is it okay to approach them? I mean, the answer is they may be too busy to talk to you at some point, but that doesn't mean that they're always too busy to talk to you, and you should never be scared to approach them. I would be mortified if my team was scared of me. I know that I can walk past them with my game face on sometimes, and they do know when might be a good time to approach me and when might not. But you know, again, a good production manager should always be ready and willing to listen to their team. But it is a full-on job with huge amount of responsibility. You can be on call 24 hours a day, but it has huge rewards too. And to get to stand back and watch the thing that you have been instrumental in creating, there's probably been no greater privilege for me. And so yeah, the rewards are massive, but the challenges are massive too, and it can really take it out of you. So I'll go back to mental health. Look after yourself, and for yourself and your team, create a nice environment away from home, and be kind to yourself. I recently did a mental health first aid course, and it really, really helped me understand where people are at the point of crisis, and also where I'd maybe faced my own challenges with looking after myself on tour. And I really don't mind sharing that, because I think it's really important that we talk about it. And it can really be easy to get sucked into the work hard, play hard, but you need sleep, you need your time out, you need to eat well, you need to not drink too much alcohol. Of course, you can have let loose a little bit a couple of times, but save that to the end of the tour or to the end of the show, because it's not going to do you any favors during it. I think that's probably my key piece of learning that I've had to do. And I think in terms of a typical day on tour, I was usually up at about 7 or 8 in the morning. I'd get down, have breakfast, make sure I eat. I wasn't always very good at that at the beginning of touring. And check in on my schedules, obviously check all my WhatsApp groups, make sure everyone was all right, get myself down to site, and run the schedule for the day. It's you're first up in the morning and you're last to bed at night, usually, unless you can hand over to someone who you trust. And it is really, really important to have those deputies and those people that can step up when you're not able to be there, because you cannot be there the whole time. You might want to be, and again, that's a lesson I learned that you can do 1 20-hour day, but you can't do them on the trot. It doesn't work. And that means you're not looking after yourself. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's really rewarding, and I wouldn't have changed my experience for anything. I just thought I'd put in a couple of final pictures, really, just to show you the joy of working together, and the people that make these things happen. And there's a shot of us right at the end of one of the shows with the flame going off ahead of us, over our heads, and that was I think that was the final night, and we might have been allowed to go off and have a couple of shandies before bed that evening. And then I thought it was just worth saying a bit about advice on how to get into the industry, and also then open it up for any questions. My advice would be work experience. I think I said when I talked a bit about my own experience at the beginning, I worked for free for quite a long time. I'm not saying that you should work for free forever, but understanding that, if you get an opportunity to go and do some work experience, then I mean, I just did as much as I could get my hands on, and within that I made lots of connections, and I can directly see the path that I took and the people that I met, and how it all sort of linked in. Commit, if you want to do this, do this. It is a big commitment, but as I said, the rewards are really great, and really big. Don't be scared to start at the bottom or ask questions. Work hard, and again, don't be scared to do the small jobs. I still offer all of the people that I work with in the office a cup of tea, and I'm supposedly the boss, but I'm never going to be not making tea for people. Nothing is beneath you. Never ask somebody to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. One of my great friends and mentors taught me that. It was at Glastonbury, and she was on her way towards one of the portaloos with a spanner, and I looked at her and I said, "What on earth are you doing?" I said, "Get one of the site guys to do that." And she just looked at me really witheringly and said, "Ceri, never ask someone else to do something that you're not willing to do yourself." And off she went, and she unblocked that toilet, and she was the boss. And that really was such a lesson, such a lesson. And I take that with me in all parts of my life. Make sure people know who you are, and be persistent. Don't be scared if you get a no. The year I met Pip, the director of Arcadia, backstage at that festival that I mentioned earlier, I'd asked to work at that festival for 3 years on the trot. and I got a no twice. And the third time, I think the guy, bless him, we're friends now, but I think he just gave me a job to shut me up because I knew I wanted it, and I knew I'd be good at it, and I wanted to do it. So I didn't give up, and I made sure he knew who I was, and I was probably a bit of a thorn in his side, and he just gave me a job to get rid of me, basically, but he didn't get rid of me. So, you know, and yeah, find something you love. If you find your stride with something and you love what you do, then you're gonna be in the lucky group. And I do consider myself in the lucky group. But it's not on this slide, but I will reiterate, look after yourself. It's a hard job, and it takes it out of you, and nobody else is going to look out for you and your well-being in the same way that you do. So you need to make that commitment to yourself. You know, and I've learned the hard way, so I don't mind sharing it with you at all. But yeah, make sure you look after yourself. And like I said, if you find yourself in this job, it can be one of the most rewarding things that you'll ever do. So yeah, good luck, everybody. And if it is something you want to do, then I'd say absolutely go for it. And that's me.
I am totally in awe. I've been listening to that, just going, see, this is why. It's like such a treat to hear you discuss this and to frame it so clearly. And I have to say, I've worked in Ceri's teams, and they are a joy. Like, just you do feel cared for and supported. There is really clear systems in place, you know, and I've been there and listened on the radio, just and been on the radios as Ceri's gone, we've just had notice the 50,000, the other stage is closed, the 50,000 people are just coming up the hill, and then you look to the left and you can literally see them, you know, parading up over the site, and it's yeah, I think
it's petrifying. I mean, I don't mind saying it still scares me. It's petrifying, but you know,
petrifying but great. And I remember that when we did Crane Dance Bristol, and that was a tiny team, but you know, there was still 90 people working on that in that final week. It went from 1 to 3 to 5 to 90, and you know, and the teams are so important. The thing that I was most proud of that was that everyone was smiling. And everyone was laughing still. So everyone was still relaxed, and also talking about the tough stuff and claiming responsibility. All those things you said about being able to say when things have gone wrong, what they're worried about, you know, so you don't get the gaping chasm of doom. But, you know, nobody was shouting, which meant we managed to get the framing of everything right so that people felt calm and empowered in their roles. And
it's about not blaming people. Oh, it was his fault. It was his fault. Like, you know, if somebody on the first time they work with me, if they come to me and they say, Ceri, I think I've made a mistake, they will have my respect for the rest of the time that I work with them. Like, absolutely 100%. The person who does that will stand out to me more than the person who does their job perfectly first time.
Yeah, completely. We've got 2 really great questions that have already come in. I'm going to take them in the order that they arrived, as my arbitrary way of starting this. The first came from Alice, who says that both people at her end who are watching this are really enjoying this webinar. But on average, how long does it take to build Arcadia, to build the spider?
So the good question, great question. Hi, thank you for watching and thank you for your question. The general build schedule from start to finish on a say a 3-day show would be about 10 days usually. So that goes from the arrival phase of the early advance party, then to the site manager and the people that actually build the structure. And then people all arrive in phased arrivals. So and then the tech team would come in and you know, put all the tech stuff on, and then the performers come, they do their day's worth of rehearsal, and then we go into show, 3 days of show, and then 3 days to dismantle it, pack it into its boxes and send it off to the next place. So yeah, it's a long schedule for, say, if you have like again, if I'm going to just use my Rihanna example that I've been talking about a bit, or any sort of more localized touring, you know, the Take That tours and stuff, they're built in a day. They do the show and they're off to the next stadium the next day. So yeah. In terms of a touring, you know, ours was a long schedule, you know, for touring things of that size.
And what did you find was the prep time? So that's the literal on the ground build time. But what was the timeline for, you know, from a first conversation with a local promoter to contracts to intensely working on it, the ground prep in with the team on your site before it got sent to the other side of the world?
I would love to be able to say 6 months, but it ranged from anything from a year to the last show we did with the Spider internationally as to this point was China in December 2018. We were in Taiwan in October and we got confirmation that we were doing the show in December, had to divert it and then advance a show in China, which is one of the most complicated territories to advance a show in the space of 6 weeks. So I always said, please give me 6 months for any new territory for a new promoter that we've not worked with before, but it wasn't always possible. But luckily by that point we'd got good, we had our systems in place, we kind of knew what we were doing, so it made it possible. It was hard, it was really hard, but the possibility was there because of these systems that I keep banging on about. They were all there, we all knew what we were doing. So that was, if someone had asked me to do that 2 years before, it would have been impossible. Completely. So ideally I would say 4 to 6 months for an advancement of a show like that. I mean, really, tours like this get planned a year in advance, at least, usually a year to 18 months, but we didn't always have that luxury, although that would have been nice.
So time is precious and sometimes annoying. I mean, I think we turned around the first version of Crane Dance Bristol in under 3 months because there was a window where the cranes were available and there was an excuse to make the event happen, and that meant the permissions were really easy. And so we just said yes because we were trying to make sure those yeses were happening and we needed to respond the same. But in my head I was like, yes, that's never 3 months is for an entire brand new production is quite a little too sharp on the edges. But I
think the official phrase is squeaky bum time.
There's a great question here from Thea. So she says, would you say that going to uni is the best path to get into this job? I'm currently studying live events production at City College, but I've been doing tech since I was 13 and now thinking about becoming a production manager. Yes, go Thea, for something along the lines of that. I've been focused on lighting since the start, but I want to broaden my horizons and put more skills under my belt because I'm extremely passionate about the industry.
I would echo what you say. Yes, go Thea. Go for it. I mean, if you're already in a course, I think, you know, and it sounds like it's in your blood. It sounds like you've been doing this for a really long time already. I will be honest, my degree probably wasn't the best possible course for me, but the avenues that it opened up by me approaching anyone that I've really wanted to work with and saying, I'm doing this course, please can I have some work experience, is probably of the most value that degree gave me. You're already doing it. There is absolutely, I would say that you will do yourself more good than not by completing it. And I know that there's some of the first jobs that I got when I first got into the industry, I know that I wouldn't have got through the CV pile had I not had a degree.
And I think my linked advice might be that if you do go and choose that course at university, look for a university where the range of additional courses that are offering around it that you might be able to get production management skills on. I mean, that you're meeting some really interesting collaborators so that those natural partnerships that might form from work you do there have legs to grow, if that makes any sense. So if you hate the fashion industry, I wouldn't be looking at a production management course or event producing course that is linked to a fashion school.
I agree completely. And I just think you can't expect, and I'm sure you don't, by the way, but you can't expect it to come to you. You've got to understand the sort of almost the privilege of your position by being on an events management course and make it work for you. You know, find the events that you feel passionate about, contact them, and if you don't hear back initially, like I said, be persistent, contact them again. Like, don't be scared of people knowing who you are, and don't be scared to keep trying. But I think that the events course gives you such a great springboard and a great platform to be able to introduce yourself to people confidently, saying, this is what I'm doing. But also, you know, don't be scared to tell people about the other bits that you've been doing. If you've been doing tech since you're 13, like, if you wrote to me, you'd be in. You know, that's impressive. That's impressive. And, you know, and I've had people where, to my shame, they've written to me and I've been on tour, or I've been so busy that I've not been able to get back. And this one guy in particular, he wrote to me 3 times, a bit like I did with that guy. And by the end, I thought, do you know what, Harry, you are a persistent young man. I'm giving you a job, you know. And I just admired his tenacity. And I think that that's a really great quality to have when you're going into production management. So yeah, I would say you're in a great place. Keep going. And yeah, and if I can be of any help, I'd be more than happy to pass on my contacts as well.
Brilliant. And I'd probably say the only other thing I'd add there is, if you're already currently studying live event production at City College, I would, and you are unsure about university, so the flip side of this, I would make sure you were really interrogating and using your right before committing to those courses to make sure that they're going to offer you some things you haven't already been given through your events production course, because you might be in an unusual situation here that you've actually, because of the quality of the tutors you've already had, you've covered a lot of things, and there may just be 1 or 2 modules or things which are different, and that you could pay for those courses independently, in which case it's the work experience. Find all the starting points. I mean, I used to work, my starting point was working 6 jobs, which were all connected into the performing arts industry, but I was just general dog's body for 6 different areas in the industry at any one point in time. So I could learn about all those different areas.
I would completely agree with you, actually, Laura, and I think it's a really important thing to say, because also not everybody, university isn't for everybody, and not everybody can afford it, and nor should they have to. And I have to say, I will say this as well, actually, I am an anomaly in my team, you know, or in the various teams I've worked in. It was quite funny. At one point, I think I'd been working in my production management role in Arcadia for about 3 years, and I'm going to apologise to everyone. Yeah, I might. Oh, no, I won't swear. But I remember saying to the 2 directors and talking about my degree, and one of them looked at me and he went, "What? You're actually qualified for this stuff?" I was like, "Yes." So, you know, it's definitely not the be all and end all. And the majority of the people that I've worked with in events across the board haven't got a degree. It's more of a recent thing. And when I say recent, I mean, I'm, you know, approaching my 4th decade. But a lot of the people that are older than me, there weren't such a thing as events management, you know, degrees back then. So it's definitely not the be all or end all. It is one route in. But if you don't feel it's for you, or if the finances are a challenge, or whatever reason it is, don't feel that that's the only route in, because I think if you care about it enough, and you're passionate enough, and you're already getting all of that work experience, I think you'll find a way there.
Great. 2 more really juicy questions. 3. It's great. This is great. I love it. So the first question that's come in is from Robin. Thank you, Ceri. Really enjoying the presentation. Yes. As someone at the beginning of their career, final year university level, what should I be doing at the moment to prepare for post-graduation? Where are the best places to find opportunities? And are there any additional qualifications courses that you would recommend?
Yes, I would. I mean, I'll sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I would say I think it has to be down to the individual. So for me, for example, the best place for me to get my work experience was through the folk music scene, because I knew people in it, and they already knew, you know, my parents. I'd been going to those festivals for, you know, since I was a a baby. So it was an easy route for me in, but it was also an art form that I loved and I'd grown up with. So that was my route in, but my route in won't be your route in. So if you love, I had someone come to do work experience with me a couple of years ago who was amazing, and he was really into esports, and he wanted to work on esport conferences and events, and I did not even know what esport meant back then. And when he was like, yeah, and now, my boyfriend's a big gamer and stuff, and now I understand that these are like some of the biggest events in the world. So I think it goes back to your passion, really. Like if you're into esports, or if you're into football, or if you're into stadium rock gigs or folk or festivals, whatever it is, I would say do the thing that you love in terms of trying to find your work experience, because that's where you'll be most passionate, and that's where you'll find your stride. So I think you've got to make it right for you. In terms of other courses, yes, it's always worth having a first aid course, always. In my line of work, it was very useful for someone to have a fire, if they've been trained in how to use a fire extinguishers and stuff. I put all of my crew through that when I could. Again, depending on what type of work you want to do, but it's always handy for me, or has been always handy for me in festivals across the board, not just Arcadia, when someone can drive plant, telehandling, things like that. But again, if you don't like driving large machineries, don't do it. But if you think, oh, I might be good at first aid, there's quite a lot of different things of skill sets that are really useful within events and festivals. It could be you could do a basic course in electricity, or like I say, training how to use fire extinguishers. I think it's about understanding the skill sets and all the different varying skill sets that are taken, like for people that are interested in becoming a rigger, doing a rope access course. I don't think there's any one individual thing, but I think that there's lots of different courses that are incredibly helpful things to add to your skill set, but it's about finding the ones for me. I'm scared of heights, so it wouldn't be worth me doing my rope access course because I'd be useless. But it is worth me doing my mental health first aid training. It is worth me doing my first aid training. It is worth me knowing how to, use a fire extinguisher. I had my first ever fire extinguisher training on site at Glastonbury about 5 years ago, and my home caught on fire and I was able to put it out. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't had that fire extinguisher training. I'd put in fire extinguishers to my home, and I'd learnt how to pull the pin out and put it out. So I know that's quite a broad answer, but I think it goes down to what you feel comfortable doing, and the courses out there that you feel like, oh yeah, I could wield a fire extinguisher, or do you know what, I think I'd be really good at first aid. So yeah, have a look into a few different things, see what you like, find out what you think you'd be good at, and what you feel comfortable at, and it's definitely worth having a few of those under your belt for sure. Yeah,
I would completely and utterly second that, because those national qualifications, those are that's really respected, that's a known quantity, what somebody has, what training they've undertaken, therefore what level of responsibility, if they're a first aid at work or an emergency first aider or a qualified first responder. These are different levels of capacity to deal with situations in higher risk or less risk situations, and it's really worthwhile. Tons more questions. So I'm going to move on from Robin's on to a question around budgeting. So what's the best way? Oh, there's so many. They're all coming in. I love it. What's the best way to manage budgets in terms of knowing the best place to spend cash? Quality over quantity, or is it a case of that's what it costs and that's that?
Well, the thing is each individual show will have, you have to create it as a whole, basically. So how I would go about budgeting a show as an individual show we'll talk about, rather than a tour, I think, just because it's a bit easier to wrap your head around. But it's about understanding. So, I was talking about the heads of department. So what I would tend to do would be to say, right, this is roughly the amount of money I think we're going to need to spend. And then I would go to the heads of department and what we would be trying to achieve. And then I would go to the individual heads of department. I say, this is what we're trying to achieve. Please, can you go away and cost up what you think it might, what it might cost. If you've run a show a number of times, you've got an idea of what it's going to cost anyway. And then within any budget, I would always, plan for the worst, hope for the best, have a level of contingency in there. Usually for me, that's around 10%. So that it means that if there's any surprises that come up, that's not going to push you over your budget. It's like the sort of the rule of programming, a festival stage, for example, is you never ever program up to the minute that you're due to be down. You don't do it. You program probably 20 minutes before your stage curfew, so that you've got time for them to do an encore. That's just the rules. And it's the same with the budget. You make sure that you're not living at the line of the top end of what you're supposed to be spending all the way through, because you've got no room for error. You've got no room for contingency, and you have to have room for contingency, because the best laid plans, you will have these external factors that will come in and they will mess you up. It just will happen. It's not anyone's fault. But if you can plan for the unforeseen, you've got your strategies, you've got your systems in there, a bit like what I was talking about earlier, and your system in this instance is your contingency budget, then yeah, I mean, then that would be my advice to start off with. Make sure that you go to the individual people who know what they're talking about. So again, going back to, my analogy about the orchestra, like, I wouldn't ask a drummer to buy a violin bow. I'd ask the violinist to buy the violin bow. So you go to your individual experts in those areas, you get them to put forward what they think it's going to cost. And then usually what you have to do is go back to them and go, you're going to need to bring that down. Tends to be what happens. But make sure that you are communicating with your team, so that everybody knows what to expect and everybody knows what is expected of them in terms of achieving what they're supposed to achieve for the budget. It goes back to, are people in the right place at the right time with the right equipment for the right amount of money? That is your job. That is what you're there to do. So, but you can't do that unless you speak to the people that are there, So yeah, it's a complicated process. Also systems. So have you got PO systems in place? Do people know what amount of money that they're allowed to spend? Is there an authorization process? All of that kind of stuff. And also cash flow. Have you got money in at the right time in order to be able to spend it? It's a real juggling act, and it's not easy. It's really not easy. But if you've got those systems in place, it helps you manage it more. And again, if people know what's expected of them, it makes it a hell of a lot easier for them to achieve it.
Next question. What would make someone stand out to you when hiring crew?
I'll go back to what I said earlier. Someone can admit that they're wrong. If they can come to me, I mean, when hiring, I guess, that's a slightly different thing. Persistence, politeness, humbleness, an ability to know what they don't know, that they're willing to learn. Someone who's kind. Like, that is so underrated, not by me, I will say. I just think, be kind, be open, be generous with your time, be humble, be aware of the things that you don't know and what you want to learn, and someone who can listen. Someone who doesn't think that they know everything straight away, because we don't. I get stuff wrong all the time, and of course I do, we all do, but yeah, someone will stand out to me if they're humble and they're kind and they're hardworking. Yeah, because you do have to work hard in this industry. It's not easy. But someone who thinks of other people. You don't have to be the best rigger, the best LD, the best, but if you're willing to work as part of a team and you want to pull in the direction of the greater good, or the achievement of the team, then you'll stand out to me.
There's a really lovely question, which I think follows on with that and links that kindness, or not only kindness to others, but kindness to yourself. Alice has asked, how do either of us take care of our well-being during these productions? Is there something that really helps us? And also, it's great hearing that there are people in the industry who haven't been classically trained, because it gives us hope. But I think that thing about, is there something that is there something that you were instinctively finding yourself doing, which you've realized, having done your mental health first aid training, and I did mine this year as well, you've gone, oh, that's my own little bit of self-care and support systems that I put around myself that's helped me when you're doing these productions?
I can tell you the things I was doing wrong.
Oh yeah.
I don't mind telling you the things I was doing wrong. Thinking I could survive on 3 hours sleep for 5 days in a row, drinking, smoking, not eating properly, it's like, you know, on an aeroplane where you've got to put your gas mask on before you can help others. Mm-hmm. The principle is never more true than when you're working on a large event. You will never be the best that you can be if you're not looking after yourself. And you know, as I said, I don't mind sharing, I'm entering into my 40th decade this year, and it's taken me really until now to really understand that those basic principles of getting enough sleep, you know, and I'm not a bendy, flexible yoga person, but just getting up in the morning and doing a few stretches, maybe going for a walk. I now started sleeping with my phone turned off. And I have a rule, it goes off at 10 o'clock at night and it doesn't switch on until 7 o'clock in the morning. You know, I don't sleep with it by my bed with the waves coming in and out. You know, because you don't get proper sleep that way. And obviously it's a more condensed time when I'm on tour or when I'm on a show. But me and my colleague, we would take it in turns. So she would have the production phone one night and I would take it the next night. So the messages would come through, but it wouldn't be to our personal phones. Because otherwise you're just constantly on the go. I think it's, you know, and for me, when I was abroad, it was, you know, little things like I'd have a lavender spray that I would put on my pillows. I would have I don't like having TVs in my bedroom. I never have, and so I would like drape leopard print's my favorite thing. So I'd drape a leopard print scarf over the TV and just put a few little things out. A little picture of my niece, you know, a few little things out that would make the hotel room feel a bit more like home. I'd make sure that I tried to get a little bit of time on my own. Whether that was a walk or something. Eating properly, sleeping. I mean, they're all sound really obvious, but it's taken me until I was 39 to really understand how much of a difference that made in terms of my ability to both lead a team, manage my own workload, and be the best I could be. So if I could give you any advice, don't wait till you're 39 to learn those lessons, and do it now.
I tour with a chunk of my soapcase full of specific cereal bars and individual packets of apricots, because I used to have huge problems with my blood sugar levels, and would often find if I was on tour or if I was working on a project abroad, the time at which I was having on the verge of passing out wouldn't necessarily coincide with the schedule of the event or with the production team or when the meals are, because we're in different time zones, or just I'm using up energy more quickly. And so I used to always pack those and always have them with me, and I would stop. I learned to just stop and eat, and so there was always some in my any bag I had with me, which became a running joke about, you know, sometimes in customs and they'd be like, you how many bags of apricots have you got? I'm like, I'm going around the world in 60 days.
Do not take my apricots.
Do not take my apricots.
I'm the same there, and mine used to be Haribo. I would shove in Haribo and crisps, and they were just empty calories, and they gave me these sugar highs or these salt. But actually, then I learned, no, don't eat the Haribo, eat the cereal bars, or and if I'm stressed, obviously, like, I'm not going to tell people not to smoke, but for me it was just perpetuating the stressness. Caffeine, it was, whereas actually if I would go and make sure I had time in the morning to go for even a walk, it doesn't have to be a run or a swim, just a walk for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just getting a bit of time to myself. And you know, if I'm telling you to be kind to other people, be kind to yourself. And if you're having a rubbish day, it's okay to tell someone. I think we all think that we have to shoulder these things and that we have to suffer alone and that we have to be strong and that we have to, oh no, I can do this, I can do this. Well, my boss, I was in South Korea, and it was one of the hardest shows I'd ever produced. I was absolutely wrung out before the rest of the crew arrived. It was hard. And he arrived and he took one look at me and he was like, "You're not coming to site today. I'm going to send you off for a massage." And I was like, no, I've got to be there. And he was like, "You're no good to me. I don't want you there. No offense, Ceri, but I don't want you there." Because he's like, "I need you. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And I need you for the marathon. So you are going for a massage and you're going to sleep. And I don't want to hear another word about it. I'm here now and I will look after this and you're going home." I was like, "Okay, boss." But it was only my own ego that didn't want me to go home. It was my body and my brain needed me to go back to the hotel and sleep and needed to go for that massage. And I turned up the next day and I was back on form and I was smashing it again. If he hadn't have done that, I would have literally limped over the finish line, probably a broken husk of a woman, and I wouldn't have been any use to anyone else. So looking after yourself is actually not just a responsibility to you, it's a responsibility to the rest of the people that are there. Because if you don't do it, you're more likely to make mistakes because you're fatigued and you're tired. And actually in the army, if you get to that point, they court-martial you. They don't give you sympathy, they court-martial you because they expect you to manage your own tiredness and your own fatigue. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. And I think my other two things which are really linked to that is that I'm really strict about, like, so when we were doing cranes, it was a tiny team. I knew there was some nights where you'd hit a second wind or you'd come for a meeting or somebody would need materials. I gave myself permission to work in the office until that task was completed. But then I got into the habit of locking my computer into my filing cabinet at work, even though it was my personal computer, not a work-owned computer, so that when I left the building, I was making a very conscious decision, which is like, Ceri, you and your phone, I was making a conscious decision about, now I'm choosing to be off duty and I'm with my friends or in a different space. And I still do that. I don't go near my computer over weekends. I don't actually take my computer into my living room. It's a really, really strange thing.
No, it's not a strange thing. Mine won't come into my bedroom. Absolutely no way.
And to me, they were things I studied because my tendency is to be a workaholic. So when I used to go to a different venue in London and I was still working as a choreographer for musical theatre, I was working 80-hour weeks for about 3-4 years.
Yeah.
And
it burns you.
It burns. Yeah, I was totally burnt out. And the other thing I do when I'm touring or I'm working in big teams is, because it can be really overstimulating everyone else's energies and their what they want to do and their priorities. And, I always have a book with me, because if you've got your nose in a book, there is this very accepted social permissions that you're not to be disturbed for a little bit.
Leave you alone. Totally.
So even if you're in a communal canteen, if you've got a book in front of you and you're reading over your breakfast, people leave you alone.
They do. But I also think learning to say, do you know what, I could just do with a bit of time to myself. I'm not quite open to it, because I've learned that my problem came actually when it was because I can solve most people's problems when I'm on tour. The propensity for me to try and do so, or the propensity for my dear colleagues to not understand when I might be on the way to the toilet or having 5 minutes on my own. It's like, again, I'll use the mum analogy. It's like mum trying to go for a wee and 3 kids knocking at the door going, "Mum, mum," and finding that space to myself, for those early morning walks, or making sure that I turned off my screens. And even if I get through half a chapter of a book or half a page, I've still done something with my brain, which is not staring at a screen and not doing everything on behalf of everybody else, because I did burn myself out pretty badly. And I would like to hope that I might be able to learn those lessons so that other people don't burn themselves out as badly as I did, because it was not pretty. And I'm able to say all of this because I've done it and I did it wrong. And I would never allow myself to go back to those places, because it's not doing anybody any favors. And there are tools, you know, like we've been talking about: turn your phone off, leave your computer at home. You know, understand that if you're giving 80 hours a week, you don't need to give another half an hour when you get back, doing the typing, doing the things. Oh God, yeah, taking all the calls. No, you're not doing anyone else any favors by doing that.
No. And you don't allow the rest of your team to grow either.
No, you don't.
So it is, this has been absolutely brilliant, Ceri, and I'm going to wind it up on that note, because it brings us all the way back to working with teams and how you take care. And actually the best projects are full of that grace and that kindness that you've spoken about, and that openness, and knowing when to say I don't know, or I can't, or I'm not able.
Yeah.
And actually that's a real strength in any team. So if you hear that around you, you know, and you see that in the work colleagues, and you feel able to be open like that yourself, then you're in a really good team.
I agree. And there's real magic, actual magic that both you and I have been so fortunate to witness, when you get those incredible, amazing people with all of those different skills being able to come together. It is one of the biggest privileges of my entire life to have been able to be part of that. So yeah, when you find it, and guys watching it, you will, if you want it hard enough, I fully believe that you will, grab hold of it and be humble and ask questions, and don't be scared to be wrong.
Brilliant. From all of us at the Barbican, everyone watching and everyone who's going to get to enjoy this afterwards, thank you so much for your insight and your wisdom, Ceri.
It's been an absolute privilege. Thanks for inviting me.
Pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See you next week.
Bye.